What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm eBike Builder, and in this video I'm going to talk about using the Grin Phaserunner controller. So this is an electronic speed controller from Grin in Canada. They have a lot of DIY e-bike conversion stuff. So these sell these Phaserunner controllers. It's like a white labeled version of the ASI BAC 855 controller. That's what this Phaserunner V6 is. So ASI is a company, another company in Canada, Waterloo or something. So they make the controllers. Grin white labels them. And then so like one thing that you got to be aware of is like, so when you get the ASI controller through ASI, very expensive. You basically have to sign up to be like an ASI, like a partner. And it's kind of like telling ASI that you're interested in being like a, you know, like a manufacturing partner who's going to sell controllers like to your customers, right? Like ASI, they don't want to deal with selling like one-off controllers to all these little people. Like they really only want to sell you a controller if you're kind of someone who knows how to tune controllers and can read documentation and all that stuff. So ASI, they don't just hand them out to anybody, but you can buy them through Grin. So when you buy it from Grin and you get the Phaserunner, it's a little bit different. You don't get support from ASI, so you can't email ASI, even though it's an ASI controller. You don't get support from ASI. You can't go to the ASI documentation, and it requires a login now. Like you used to be able to look at the ASI documentation, even as like a Phaserunner user who's not an ASI customer, right? But now they've locked their documentation down, ASI has. So it's like you can't even look at the documentation unless you have a username and a password with ASI. That's something that I ran into when I was using the Phaserunner. And so how the Phaserunner works is I think they must have some kind of agreement with Grin where Grin buys the controllers, they white label them, and then they sell them like one-off, you know, and then Grin deals with the customer support overhead of the motor controllers. And so if you're gonna buy one of these Phaserunners from Grin like you gotta be aware that like the only way that they're really gonna provide a whole lot of help is if you go to their shop and you buy the whole kit, like right here, like all of these kits. Like they have all these different kits where you buy the controller, the display, and like just like the motor, and like get a wheel built. So when you buy the whole kit and you spend a lot of money with Grin, they do provide customer support, is my understanding. But if you just buy the controllers, like the support that they offer you is pretty limited, and you kind of have to figure it out on your own. And I get a lot of questions from people about the BBSHD and like how to get it working with the Phaserunner. And it seems like Grin kind of like discourages doing this now. In the past, Grin they used to sell wire harnesses for their Phaserunners that would connect like directly to the BBSHD, and they even have a video. So let's just look at that. So we're on the Phaserunner product page here, but there's a note here about use with BBSHD systems. So this basically says like Grin they don't really want to help people with the BBSHD. So like just so you're aware and you don't waste your time, like if you send them an email about the BBSHD, I'm pretty sure it just goes to like a trash bucket folder that they never ever see. Like they don't want to deal with it. So I'm going to try and make this quick video and help you guys get your BBSHD going with the Phaserunner. And I'll try and lead you guys down the right path here with everything that I know about it. I've done it on a few different bikes, and it can be like a little bit different every time, so I'll try and point you in the right direction. But it does take some messing around, and depending on your specific bike and your gearing and your drivetrain and everything, like there's a lot of little challenges that like you're kind of on your own with. And wiring the BBSHD to another controller, like you better be comfortable connecting wires, you know, like crimping something onto wires and connecting wires and maybe soldering something. Like that's what it's going to take to probably do this, unless you buy the wiring harness somewhere from somebody else. But like Grin they don't want to help you, right? Like it says use with BBSHD systems. We get frequent inquiries from people who want to use the Phaserunner as an upgraded motor controller for Bafang BBSHD mid-drive systems. In principle, this can be done. Several years ago, we produced a video on this topic and even made an adapter cable to facilitate the hookup. However, we found that most people embarking on that project did not understand the process, resulting in an extremely high support overhead from people trying to adapt BBSHDs for no particular reason. In fact, almost 80% of all our Phaserunner troubleshooting was tied up by the small portion of BBSHD users. The stock controller on a BBSHD is just fine. If people have a failed BBSHD motor controller they want to replace, we recommend they replace it with a controller that is engineered specifically as a drop-in replacement. Alright, so what they're saying here is like, it's possible to use the BBSHD with the Phaserunner, but like they're not going to help you. They don't want to deal with it. Like, it's apparently most people doing it just like don't know what they're doing, and it was a big headache for Grin. They do have this video right here, unlisted video from 2019 of adapting a BBSHD to run a Phaserunner. In the end, we regretted having made this. like this is the information that is in this alternate text on this anchor on the website. Like there's all, like you always have to hover over everything from GrinTech, because like they put all these little secrets in the tooltip text, and we'll get into that over here in the Phaserunner suite. Like you got to hover your mouse over all of this stuff so that you can see all of these little tips in the Phaserunner suite. So I'm going to show you everything I know. Alright, so like GrinTech, they don't want to help you. If you buy a whole kit, like right here, support limitations. If you buy the whole kit from GrinTech, they give full warranty and support whenever it's purchased as a kit. And everything comes pre-configured, right? So like if they configure the motor and you're buying the whole kit and they set up the whole thing and they program it, and then you're just going to use a pre-configured kit and you're not messing with it, like that's what Grin would prefer, right? Like they would prefer to convert your e-bike for you, just like set up the whole kit, send it to you, and then you just like strap the wheel on your bike and strap the Phaserunner on your bike and go, right? But they don't sell BBSHDs, so like you can't do this with the BBSHD in GrinTech, because there's no BBSHD kit from GrinTech. And I don't like, so they're kind of like really discouraging it here, and they're saying trying to adapt BBSHDs for no particular reason. I mean, there are reasons that people do it, right? Like when you're on a normal BBSHD, you have to shift through like 7 gears to get up to your top speed, and each time you shift, the brake or the shift sensor cuts off power to the motor. So like if you have to shift 6 times or 5 times or like shift through a bunch of gears to get up to your top speed, and each shift it's pausing that motor power for a second, like it's just like slower, you know, and it's annoying having to shift the bike so much on lower voltage, and then when you get on higher voltage you can just go like 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour in your first gear, and like you don't have to shift as much. And also the field weakening on these controllers, like the BBSHD, it has a IPM, internal permanent magnet rotor, right? So if you look at the difference between the BBSHD rotor and the BBSO2 rotor, like they're completely different. And okay, so here's the BBSHD rotor right here. So this is an IPM rotor. The magnets are inside of it, so they're not going to go flying out and fall apart. But on the BBSO2, that's this rotor right here. And it's a piece of junk. And basically, like, if you go, I mean, it's kind of crazy how the magnets are even held in this thing in the first place. Like, look at this. And there's just like these little, the magnets are just kind of like wedged in there. And then the little pieces of metal in between the magnets can like bend, and then the magnets will just start coming loose, And like I tried to JB weld one of these BBSO2 rotors, and like it seemed like the magnets were staying on there, but then I think the rotor was like kind of unbalanced. And when I burned up my motor, there were like 5 magnets that were just totally burnt out and demagnetized. But the long story short is like, don't try and do this with the BBSO2. Like, it's just not even worth it. If you're going on the BBSO2, keep it 48 volts or 52 volts and just keep it on a stock controller. Like, there's no point in really trying to upgrade a BBSO2. It's just so easy to break it. These magnets on this BBSO2 rotor, they came flying off like the moment that I put it on 72 volts with a Phaserunner, just in the bike stand. I wasn't even riding the bike, and the magnets started coming loose on this rotor. So it's a piece of junk. The BBSO2, like, it's not made like when you're using the BBSO2, it's running at like almost its limit. Like, just like all, like, there's just, it's like standing on the edge of a cliff, and if you push the BBSO2 at all, like, you're just pushing it off a cliff and it's gonna break. Like, people have told me they run it on 60 volts and stuff, but I still think, like, if you want to upgrade one of these mid drives, you just gotta do it with the Fang BBSHD, because it's got the IPM rotor that that can handle the field weakening and the extra power and stuff. And that's the main thing, is like when you're doing field weakening, like, I think that's what messed up this rotor, was the field weakening. Possibly high voltage, but I think it was probably the field weakening. So this thing, BBSHD, is way better. Like, don't try anything of what I'm telling you in this video with the BBSO2. Like, even though it seems like it's so close to the BBSHD and it's just slightly smaller, like, it's completely different on the inside. Okay? And if you're gonna do this with the BBSHD, it has limitations. Like, it gets hot, it heats up. It's a 1,000 watt motor, and you can only do 4,000 watts or 5,000 watts with it for so long, and then it heats up. So, like, and the BBSO2, like, that thing is, like, it's just pointless to upgrade, so don't do it. So I'm gonna move on back to that's my warning. Like, I just wanted to warn everybody not to do the thing that I did with the BBSO2. I have a whole video where I put the BBSO2 on a Phaserunner and 72 volts, and I had it with a cycle analyst, and then, like, it was making a funny noise, and then I just kept riding it, and then that was it. Like, the motor was done, and I still have it sitting over here, and it needs a new motor core. And thankfully they're only $100, but like, I completely lost interest in the BBSO2 after that. You gotta do it with the BBSHD. So that's your warning. Let's move along with the BBSHD and the Phaserunner. So Grin, like, they're not gonna help you. You're gonna want, if you get a Phaserunner. So the thing about the Phaserunner, like, I kind of got sick of it. It's so expensive. I mean, look at this. It's so expensive. The Phaserunner, it's crazy. And so, like, so a few years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago maybe, it wasn't easy to find controllers where you could do 72 volts, you know, and use it on an e-bike. And like the Phaserunner was just kind of like one of the better options, and it was just more expensive. And there was just, that's just how it was. That's nice because it's waterproof. All the connectors are waterproof. It's a, you know, it is a high quality ASI controller. On the high end, like in terms of top speed, like if you're just going for top speed and performance on the very high end, my experience has been that the Phaserunner's field weakening, in some way, it's better than like the Flipski and Vesk, because what I've found is like the field weakening, if you have like 24 amps of field weakening on the Phaserunner, they'll basically get you going faster than if I'm doing like 40 amps of field weakening with the Flipski and Vesk. So I don't know if like the field weakening algorithm in the ASI controllers is just like way better in some way, or like what it is, but at first I thought it was kind of a bummer that so if you're on a Phaserunner after V6, they limit the field weakening, this max field weakening current in the Phaserunner suite, that's limited to 25% of whatever you use for the max phase current right here that I'm highlighting blue back and forth. So like, you might be able to type a number in here for the top speed overdrive for this max field weakening current. Like you can type 50 in there if you want to try that. But then when you save it to the Phaserunner, if you're actually connected to the Phaserunner, which I'm not right now, but if you're connected to a Phaserunner and then you try and save 50 field weakening with the V6 Phaserunner, there's code that runs on the Phaserunner firmware, like inside of the controller. So like when you save these parameters to the controller, it's kind of like saying, okay, save this parameter to this value, save this parameter to this value, save this parameter to this value, right? And that's what this software, the software sends a message to the Phaserunner controller telling it to change parameters. But then the software, the firmware that's on side of the Phaserunner, that's just like baked in there from ASI, like you can't change this behavior. Like if you try and save this max field weakening current right here to more than 25% of the max phase current, like it's just, you'll save it and it'll seem like it's saved, but then when you reload the settings from the Phaserunner, like this max field weakening current will always get reset back to like exactly 1/4 of 90, whatever that is. So like 90 divided by 4 is 22.5 or something. So if you try to set this, max it out, it'll probably just go back to 22.5, and then it'll be the most that you can use for the field weakening. Which seems like kind of a bummer, but like I said, the field weakening works really good in the ASI controllers. I don't know what it is. But, so then, let's talk about setting the BBSHD up in the Phaserunner suite. So, in general, like if you're just on like so there's like a general purpose way to set this up where you just kind of like load the default parameters and you load in the default parameters and just kind of like maybe increase your power limits a little bit and like your phase amps and set your battery current and stuff. But then if you're on a lower voltage battery, like I would just use the default parameters from Grin. Right? Like if you're on 48 volts or 52 volts, it's not even worth getting a Phaserunner if you're on 48 volts or 52 volts. But if you are going to try and, if you have a Phaserunner, right, and you're just going to try and use it with a 48 or 52 volt battery in the BBSHD, like you don't want field weakening on. It just gets way too hot on lower voltage. I think you need, and it doesn't seem like it really like works much at all. Like I guess when you're on higher voltage, with field weakening, there's just like more torque overhead or voltage overhead or something. I don't know. Like I asked the AI about it one time. But like if you want to do field weakening, like you need higher voltage. Right? So that's the thing about the BBSHD. Don't try and use field weakening if you're on 48 volts or 52 volts. And I would say like the lower voltage that you're on, like if you're on 60 volts, then you don't want to use as much field weakening as on 72 volts. And basically, like, you gotta have the temperature sensor hooked up in your BBSHD so that you can roll back the power and throttle the power when the BBSHD starts to heat up. So, like, don't try the Phaserunner. Like, they show how to do it in this Grin how to upgrade a BBSHD mid drive. I don't know if they show all of the wiring. I did a video, e-bike builder BBSHD L10 connector wiring. I did a video a while back. Where I wired a BBSHD up into an L10 motor connector. So that's like these guys, right? These cables that come on a lot of hub motors. So if you open up your BBSHD, it is possible to like wire one of these L10 connectors into the BBSHD. It's not ideal, but it makes it kind of like convenient if you use your BBSHD with a lot of different controllers that have the L10 connector. Like I've had The reason I did it is I have like 3 phase runners with the L10 connector, and I wanted to use them with the BBSHD. So if you want, and then also for like 3 years, Grin, they weren't selling the phase runner that is made for, that is more suited for wiring up to the BBSHD. So let's go back to the phase runner. So right here, you can see there's 2 phase runners. There's this phase runner L10 on the right here that's like animating right now. You can see it's got that motor cable, the L10 motor cable on it. So that was the only one that was available for these past like 3 or 4 years. Like Grin, they just weren't selling this MT version of it that has the kind of like the different wiring. So the difference here is that like, so this motor cable, the L10, it's got like all the Hall sensor wires and then the phase wires, and like all that stuff goes through the cable into the motor. And then this MT one, they must have just started selling this one again. So this is probably what you would want to get if you're going to get a phase runner for a BBSHD, is you'd want to get this V6 phase runner MT controller. So it says there's an MT60 connector for the phase wires. There's a JST for the Hall sensors and speed signals. So you might need like a JST crimpers. I think it's JST SM or something. So I've got a video on that. So let's see here. I have a video where I show these crimpers that I just bought recently. So it was like Flipski, hub motor, e-bike builder, crimpers. I don't know. Oh, here it is. So it's wire, Bafang, hub, and Flipski 75100 Pro V2 with JST SM crimp kit. So in this video, it's a different controller, but this is the crimping and the wiring that it would require. Like, you got to get these crimpers to be able to crimp these little connectors onto these little tiny signal wires. So you might need a crimpers like this, like a JST SM crimpers, to be able to complete, like terminate this and hook the wires together with this phase runner. I don't think that they sell. I still think that Grin, even though they sell this phase runner MT controller, they don't sell the BBSHD harness anymore. Like, I think they just discontinued that, and they just got fed up with people with the BBSHD. Like, they just don't want anything to do with it anymore, right? But so you would probably, if you're doing a BBSHD, you'd probably want the Phaserunner MT. And then for the motor cable harness, I don't think, I'm not sure. Like, you might have to ask Grin. I don't know what's going on with this because it's so new. It looks like the text on this Phaserunner product page is still outdated. Like, it hasn't been updated since like 2023 or something. But I think you would want to buy the Phaserunner MT, and then so when you buy a Phaserunner, you basically got to buy the Cycle Analyst, right? That's just how it works. And so the Cycle Analyst that you usually get is the Cycle Analyst WPX and MF switch, and then that hooks to the Cycle Analyst. Has this plug right here that hooks to the Phaserunner, and it sends all of this stuff: throttle, speedo, shunt, thermistor, key switch. So a lot of the communications between the Phaserunner and the Cycle Analyst display go through that. And you'd probably want this one, CA3 WPX with the MF switch, because it comes with the switch. And then usually you want this mounting bracket that goes under your stem top cap. But if you've got some kind of funny handlebars, there's also like a handlebar clamp, or you can just clamp it onto the bars. But usually, like, if you have normal handlebars, like mountain bike handlebars, this handlebar clamp, like, you can't center it on the bars because the stem is in the center. It really bothers my OCD when it's not centered. So make sure that you pick the right option right there. Okay? And so when you buy the CA3 WPX and MF switch and then the Phaserunner, it should be pretty easy to hook together. It's just like plug and play. But then setting it up, like configuring the motor in the Phaserunner suite, is the part where GrinTech like really doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. So the first thing that you should do is probably go watch this video that GrinTech made that they like tried to hide away, and they say that they regret doing now. I mean, personally, it seems like this video has 57,000 views on it. So I mean, over 10,000 views a year. And I mean, I think it's still useful. I don't really understand why they got rid of this. It says, we're leaving the video here for reference sake. Do not recommend people embark on this project. It says, we're not really into mid-drive conversion kits. We thought it would be worth trying it out ourselves and making a video to show the process. And then they say, we're not advocating anyone with a perfectly functional stock BBS setup should pull out the controller and display and hook it up to an external controller just for fun. There's little point in that. But if you are after some of the benefits of our Phaserunner external controller, 72 volt operation, field weakening, programmable phase, and battery current limits, this might be an interesting option. If it seems complicated, then it's probably not a good fit for your skills. If it seems like an awesome DIY hack that you'd enjoy to customize and upgrade your rig, now you can see the details before you dive in. So I didn't know this video existed. I've never watched this. I watched it last night when I was kind of paying attention. And there were a few little things that I caught in here that were kind of interesting. There's some good information here about, like, once you have everything wired up, how to get the pedal assist set up in the cycle analyst. And then they also talk about the temp sensor here a little bit. So I think in the pedal assist device, you set it to like a basic pedal assist device, and then it's like 20, I think it's 24 poles or something, is what they said. And it's a 2-wire signal type, so there is some information in this video that's useful for configuring the cycle analyst. If you do hook up the BBSHD pedal assist to the cycle analyst pedal assist, you'd have to run a wire from the motor up to the cycle analyst, so it's kind of like a long wire run up your whole bike from the motor. And then they show you how to configure the cycle analyst for the temp sensor. I'm just going to let this play here just for like posterity's sake, just in case GrinTech ever deletes this.
Typically you want to have assistance whenever you're pedaling. We're going to set this up to give power assistance. And the power level maximum assist, we'll run this one. Let's maybe do 8 more.
This coffee is just overheating me, boys. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, but like,
the exact amount here is a matter of
I'm overheated all of a sudden. Holy buckets. Wow.
fine to start off with. And the next
Caffeine
thing
just
is
hit me.
the temperature sensor. So if we plug in the cables correctly at room temperature,
Oh,
you should see
so hot.
3 to 3.5 volts coming off of that thermistor. That way we know that it's hooked up right. If the sensor was unplugged, we would see 4.99 volts there. We wouldn't be able to get a temperature reading out of it. So instead of a disabled temperature sensor, we can now safely say this is a thermistor.
My hair is crazy right now, Bubs. I'm so hot.
Roll back power from the motor overheating. The default values of 90 to 130 are fine. You can push the motor to hotter temperatures if you want to, but this is a nice conservative value that will always keep you in a very safe operating zone for the motor. So on this bicycle, we installed the digital up-down push buttons for setting the amount of assistance that we're getting when we're riding. So we're going to enable Digi-Aux, and this is a two-button control.
Alright, so I think they showed us how to set up the temp sensor and stuff there. So make sure that you check out this unlisted video from Grin. They're apparently trying to hide away, but it was still pretty useful. So this is like the part that people need the most help with, is the Phaserunner settings, like configuring the BBSHD in the Phaserunner. So sorry it took so long to get here. Like, I'll make a timestamp or something. But like, I just wanted to walk you through like this whole thing and like the whole Grin situation and how they don't like the BBSHD and like what, you know, like why I wired up, like how I wired up my BBSHD to the Phaserunner in the past. So let's talk about how do we configure the BBSHD. Like, once you've hooked everything up, right? You got the cycle analyst on your bike. It's plugged into the Phaserunner with this thing. Phaserunner is connected to the battery. Phaserunner is wired up to your BBSHD. I'm not going to talk about the wiring in this video because I've got it in that other video. So you've got everything hooked up, but then so now you got to like use your Phaserunner suite and the software from Grin to configure the motor, the BBSHD. And so this is the part that like it can be a little bit different depending on what voltage you're on and what bike you're using, but I'll try and show you like the general steps and point you in the right direction for how to do it. So what I would start out with is so you got to open up the Phaserunner suite, plug in that $25 programming cable from Grin. Be careful with that thing, that USB TTL cable that you use to. It's this weirdest thing. Like, this is what I don't like about the Phaserunner, and this is one of the reasons that I don't use it really a whole lot anymore. It's like, I like messing around with the settings and changing parameters, and I'm always like plugging in different batteries. So then you got to go into the settings in your controller and change like the voltages to make sure that it matches your different battery voltages. So like, I'm just always switching things, and I need something on my phone, or like really I need an app on my phone. Like, that's just where we're at here. It's 2025. Like, motor controllers for e-bikes should have an app on your phone where you can customize things from in there, right? And the thing about the cycle analyst, or the thing about the Phaserunner, is like, you got to plug in this USB cord to a computer. There is a Phaserunner suite on Android, but it's like this buggy piece of junk, and like, I don't recommend using it. It's like this old experimental version, and I don't think that they support the Android version of the Phaserunner suite. So, and it's like, if you try using the auto tune and stuff in the Android version, like, it's just weird. It's not the same. So like, you basically have to use this desktop version. If you want to use the Android version of the Phaserunner suite, like, you can use it, but it's all you can do is just like change, like turn off your field weakening, or like turn your field weakening back on. That's really all that the Android app is useful for. And the thing about the Android app is like, you still have to use a physical cord, right? Because the Phaserunner, it doesn't have Bluetooth. Like, it has this damn headphone jack, and you gotta stick this cord in there and then connect. It's like a USB thing on the other end, so you gotta figure out how do you hook a USB cable into your phone, and you need like some adapter fucking dongle thing, right? And so it's just like, these Phaserunners, like they're meant to be like programmed at a computer, and it's not like, it doesn't have an app on your phone like a VESC controller where you can just like change everything and like do everything with your phone. Like on VESC, you barely even need a computer. Like you rarely need a computer. But with the Phaserunner, like this is like the only way. Like if you're setting it up for the first time, like you need the computer, and that's like the only way you can do it, right? So let's talk about like just the general steps, right? Like, so in the Phaserunner suite, like what you always do is you open this up, then you load the default parameters, and then it opens up this guy. And so I'm on Linux, and I've just put this Phaserunner suite on this Linux computer. I've never used the Grin Phaserunner suite on Linux before. And so I don't know, like I'm getting some error. There's a network error getting the remote firmware list. Please ensure you're connected to the internet. I don't know why the Phaserunner suite thinks I'm not connected to the internet. Like probably some Linux thing that I'm gonna have to figure out. But on Mac and on Windows, like it just always worked. So you'd click load latest defaults from Grin to get the most current default files from Grin server, right? And then hopefully you wouldn't get this error like I do. If you know how to fix this on Linux, let me know. I tried to chmod the app image -x or whatever, and it's still not doing it. But yeah, so under the manufacturer, there should be like Bafang. You would select Bafang, and then under model, it would be BBSHD. And then under controller, you would pick Phaserunner V6 with Cycle Analyst 3 is the option that you pick for the controller. And then you hit apply. And then so what that'll do is it'll change this number, like the KV, it'll change the pull pairs. It might change these LS and the RS. It might change this. I don't know if it changes it to just Hall sensor for the BBSHD. I think it can go slightly faster when you use Hall sensor start and sensorless run. But I think that I've noticed, like sometimes when you're using a lot of field weakening and you're going very fast, like on the high end, it seems like the Hall sensors can almost slow you down, and it'll go faster in sensorless. So I usually use it like this, and that's usually like what it comes up with after I do the auto tune on the BBSHD. So it's kind of like the basic process. Is you load the default parameters for the BBSHD, then it'll save it. It'll change a bunch of things, right? Then you hit the auto tune right here by this yellow box, that auto tune, and you go through that whole auto tune process, right? So first we'll do the static test where it just like hums. It's like right, and the wheel might like kind of like wiggle a little bit, but it doesn't move. And then after the static test, you do like the wheel moving test. And that's actually going to spin the motor and spin the chainring on the BBSHD. So like the chainring is going to be going, and then the chain's going to be going, right? Like the motor's going to be going during that test. So when you're doing the auto tune, what you want to do is like pull your derailleur forward and then take the chain off of the chainring so that the chain is completely disconnected from the motor and the chainring, and then the chainring is just spinning freely for the auto tune. If you have the chain connected to your wheel on the drivetrain when you do the auto tune, like you can just get funny results. So garbage in, garbage out. Like you gotta take the chain off to do the auto tune, ideally, right? It also makes it easier because then you don't have to take the wheel off the ground or anything. You can just do the auto tune, and your chainring is spinning, but no wheels are spinning, right? And so if you open this up, you load the default parameters, and you do the auto tune. That works on low voltage, and you can maybe increase the power limit to like 2,000 watts or something. You can increase the phase amp to 90 amps, like the max that the Phaserunner can do. BBSHD can do 90 phase amps, no problem. If you're on a lower voltage, I don't know if you'd want much more on the battery current. Like, you know, BBSHD is made for 30 amps on 48 volts. So you could maybe try a little bit more, but I wouldn't go too much more than like 2,000 or maybe like 2,500 watts on 48 volts. And it's probably really just going to help you. I mean, it might help a little bit, but again, like you want to be on high voltage when you're doing this, right? So in low voltage, don't do field weakening, right? But so, and then on low voltage, like if you're on 48 volts, you shouldn't have to change any of like this feedback bandwidth tuning over here. But when you go on high voltage, that's when you have to start changing, like messing around with these feedback bandwidth tuning things over here to be able to get everything working smoothly on high voltage with the BBSHD. So, like, let's imagine I loaded the defaults for the BBSHD. I did the auto tune, and then I saved it. And so it'll have different numbers here and here and here and here. It'll have different numbers like over here. It'll have different numbers. So let's imagine I just did that. So now I'm going to change everything how I want it to make the BBSHD work good on like 72 volts. Right, so the max power limit, you can make it like, personally I think like 2500 watts or like 3000 watts is kind of like the sweet spot when you're on 72 volts with the field weakening. But you can make it do like 4000 or 5000 watts. I think the BBSHD can take in about 55 amps on 72 volts. So, I mean, if you're trying to push it to the max, 5000 watts is probably close to the limit, depending on your battery voltage. Like I said, 90 phase amps, that's fine. Max battery current, it'll probably be like 55 or something. 55 amps is all the BBSHD can really do. So the regen voltage, you want to make sure that these are set to like your battery's full charge voltage. So if you're on a 72 volt battery, it would be like 84 or something, like 84.5. Like this. You'd want to change those guys. And then also under the advanced setup, you want to make sure that this fast over voltage fault and this slow over voltage fault is set higher than your battery's full charge voltage. So on mine, I have a 21S battery, so that's one more cell in series than a 72 volt battery. So on mine, I make mine like 88, and then this up here I make it 88.2. Or no, I think I make these values like the same as, I kind of make I make the max regen voltage match this. So kind of just like slightly under 90 volts is what I do for 21S. So just like this. That should be good. I mean, we could do like 89.9 and then like 89.5 or something. And then, or 89.9 and 89.4 or something like that is probably good, because there's components inside of the Phaserunner that are only rated to 90 volts. So you want to kind of keep it. 21S battery goes up to like 88.2 volts. So, like if my battery goes above like 89 volts, that is kind of like a bad situation. So maybe like this, 89.5 and 89 on 21S. And then so what I do, okay, so this is the part that's like the arcane knowledge that I'm sharing with you here. So if you made it all the way through this long video, which is becoming a lot longer than I intended, this is the important part. Alright, so make sure you like and subscribe, because this is the part that's going to let you get your BBSHD working smoothly on high voltage. So over here, under feedback bandwidth tuning, when we're on high voltage, we have to change these things. And so if you hover your mouse over these texts, these labels, it'll tell you all these secrets from Justin. So it says right here about feedback bandwidth tuning. It says the feedback parameters affect how the controller maintains the target phase current through the motor windings. Values that are appropriate for a given motor will often result in the controller having instantaneous phase over current faults. So you'll get those faults if these settings are like not tuned right. So, and how this is, and how you have to do that. And so if you hover over this current regulator KP, that label, it says, normally this term is calculated along with KI based on the current regulator bandwidth on the basic setup tab. So that's this, right? That's this right here. Usually you just adjust this current regulator bandwidth right here, and then that adjusts the KP and the KI together in some way. So I guess it's like just a simpler way that you can usually adjust this feedback bandwidth tuning is just to like change the current regulator bandwidth, and then you don't have to mess with the KP and the KI, and these fields are kind of like grayed out for the KP and the KI. You can't change them right now, they're disabled. But on the BBSHD, I don't know why, but like you gotta come in here and change this current regulator bandwidth to 0. Right, and then what that lets you do is it'll unlock these things right here, the current regulator KP and the current regulator KI. And then for the BBSHD on the Phaserunner, I changed the KP to 1 and then the KI to 10. And don't ask me what that means. Like, I don't know. Like, all I know is like this thread on Endless Sphere has a lot of little clues that helped me get my BBSHD working on high voltage, and that was just one of the things from this thread on Endless Sphere. Is that, I don't know what the deal, like how people came up with this, but it's like when you change KP to 1 and KI to 10, and then you turn on the field weakening with the BBSHD, like that was kind of like what got it going faster, top speed for me. Until I changed the KP and the KI, like it was just kind of like weird. It just felt like jittery or funky or something, like oscillating, or it's like something was funny. So I would turn on your field weakening of the BBSHD, just make it as much as you can in the Phaserunner suite, which is about 22.5. And then change current regulator bandwidth to 0, KP to 1, KI to 10. Save that, and it should start going faster. But then after that, my experience has been that you have to change this PLL bandwidth and the PLL damping. So it says for the PLL bandwidth, it says this is a feedback term for the controller's phase lock loop that tracks the rotational position of the motor. This term can have a significant effect in controller motor oscillations and vibration at various speeds. Suitable values can range between 20 to over 200. And so what I've found on the BBSHD is like you have to bump this up a lot. Like I would start out with, I think it's a default of like 1000 when you load the BBSHD default settings in. I think the PLL bandwidth is set to 1000, and then this PLL damping is set to like 1.78. So it'll probably look like this for you, 1000, 1.78 by default. But then what I would try, and I found this on this thread here. It's like inside of this thread, a bunch of people say that Justin tells them to increase the PLL bandwidth. So you'd have to go search through this thread. I mean, it's just like 10 pages long. There's a lot of stuff in this thread. But there's some people, and they did manage to get like an email response from Justin about setting up the BBSHD with the Phaserunner. So I think this was prior to Grin getting sick of the BBSHD. But so Justin himself has provided, there's some clues for setting up the BBSHD in here, but the one that helped me was like, you may need to increase the current regulator bandwidth and PLL bandwidth parameters if you end up getting instantaneous overcurrent faults. So that is the little clue that I found where I started messing around with this PLL bandwidth. And what this seems to do is like if you have any oscillating or like it just doesn't seem like it's running smooth, this can help. And then also I think this helps like when you're hitting the throttle and doing like hard acceleration from a stop and like really trying to accelerate hard and fast, and like I think this PLL bandwidth and this damping, like these are kind of the things, these two right here, the PLL bandwidth and the PLL damping. Like, well, what I would do is just keep increasing it. I would start out by changing the PLL bandwidth to like 1500 or like 2000 and then change the PLL damping to like 2. Right, and try that. And try that at various speeds. Accelerate hard from a stop. Get it going as fast as you can. You know, see how it's doing. See if it's running smoothly at all speeds. Right, that's kind of like, you just have to keep changing these values until it seems like it's running smoothly at all speeds, and then be very careful. Like when you're first hitting the throttle, you have to be very careful, because if the controller isn't tuned correctly and it's like oscillating and there's anything funky going on, like bad things can happen. If you're just giving it like full throttle from a stop and these settings aren't right, like sometimes the motor will just like start jackhammering and it'll just like destroy your drivetrain. So like you have to just like totally baby this. Like you can't be going crazy with it when you're tuning it. And on a lot of my bikes, what I end up doing with the BBSHD is like, I think I end up at something like 3,500 rads for the PLL bandwidth. And then for the PLL damping, like sometimes I'll have it at like 3.5. And this can kind of depend on the gearing of your bike and the wheel size. And like on my 29-inch mountain bike, compared to my 20x4 bike that I put the BBSHD on, like it's completely different. Like I need to use different values for these. On my mountain bike, I just have it single speed and it's geared super low. And it seems like on that bike, I had to increase these values a little bit more to have it running smoothly across the whole like RPM range. But then on my other bike, it's got the 20x4 wheels, and I am using the gears on my drivetrain. I'm shifting between a few gears. On that bike, I think the values for this that I used were a little bit lower. Maybe like 2,500 and like 2.5 or something. So these values over here, like this feedback bandwidth tuning, that helps if you're getting the instantaneous phase overcurrent errors, faults. You got to keep changing these values. The PLL bandwidth and the damping specifically. Like I think you can just use KP1 and KI10, and that's some kind of like cheat code that works best with the HD. And then it's just this PLL stuff that you want to mess with. So that is the feedback bandwidth tuning, very important. Like that is the arcane knowledge that you need to know, very important. And then, so I mean just, again, by the way, like the values that I have right here over under the motor settings, like these aren't right. So don't copy these, right? Like I'm not connected to my motor right now, and these are just kind of like dummy values that got loaded in when the Phaserunner suite started up here. So don't copy these four, okay? Then, so virtual electronic freewheeling, this can be nice if you have so if this is nice, the virtual electronic freewheeling, like you want to enable that and set it to like 2.5 amps or something. But if you're going to use virtual electronic freewheeling, you either need your bike to be a single speed where you're not shifting, or else if you are shifting, you need to have a gear shift sensor so that when you shift gears, and really, like, you want a brake cut off, right, is what I would do. Like, I don't trust the gear shift sensors. If you're going to use virtual freewheeling, like, you need some way to cut the power with a brake or with the shift cut off so that when you're shifting, that virtual freewheeling isn't still making the chainring go and the drivetrain's going. Because even when you have electronic freewheeling current on, like, 2 amps or, like, 1 amp, and it's just barely doing anything, just barely spinning the chain to keep the drivetrain engaged and to keep the chains under tension and stuff, like even just 2 amps, if you shift when it's doing 2 amps, that's like, you know, that's like almost 150 watts on high voltage. So I mean, that's like pedaling pretty hard. Like even just a few amps on high voltage, like that is like you pedaling as hard as you can on the bike. So you don't want to have virtual electronic freewheeling on when you're shifting unless you have some way that you can cut the power first, right? So brake cutoffs or else the shift sensor, but they can be kind of unreliable, right? And so again, I would just max out the top speed overdrive. And I don't think that I had to change the sensor list starting parameters for the BBSHD at all, because it uses Hall sensors. I will say that there's some times in the Phaserunner where, like, even when your motor has Hall sensors, like, I think that these sensorless starting parameters affect the motor, like, starting from a stop in some way. So you still might have to increase these, but I would just leave these alone. I usually have to mess with these on hub motors more, especially if you're using sensorless. Like, you'll have to tweak this a lot to get sensorless working right with a hub motor. With the BBSHD, like, you probably want the Hall sensors. I don't know if it would work great with sensorless. And then under temperature, I usually have the temperature hooked up to my cycle analyst, and that's what throttles based on the motor temperature. So I don't usually enable that within the Phaserunner. I think that's kind of it. There was one other thing that I want to tell you here, and it's on page 8 of this thread. So let's go there. So if you do all of that stuff, right? So you've done all that stuff I just told you, you've tweaked all of these, you've been playing around with the PLL bandwidth and PLL damping, and you're still running into those instantaneous overcurrent faults sometimes, what I would recommend doing is lowering your phase current right here. Lower your phase current down to like 84. So 90 is the max of the Phaserunner. And so when you lower it down to 84, you lose a little bit of torque. What is it, like 6 Newton meters or something? Use a little bit of torque from less phase current. So you'll accelerate a little bit. There'll be a little bit lower torque on the low end. But why I do that is there's this post right here. It says, I found this thread while searching for a solution to my Phaserunner MT cutting out, connected to a BBSHD. When I connected my controller to the Phaserunner suite, it was reading an instantaneous phase overcurrent fault. I've seen others with the same problem, and I've found a solution to it. After running a simulation through the Grin motor simulator with my configuration, I noticed that at low speeds the phase current is at its highest and will reach the maximum 96 amps. So they've since lowered the maximum phase current in this Phaserunner to 90 amps. So that's the difference now. So it says the Phaserunner has a hard fault current limit, which seems to also be at 96 amps. The issue presents itself when you set your phase current limit close to the maximum of 96 amps. I believe the throttling for the phase current limit you specify is not flat enough to keep it under the hard limit, so phase current spikes under hard acceleration at low speed will trigger a fault. And then they say, while the recommended adjustment of increasing PLL and current regulator settings may help with the current spikes by smoothing out the measurements, I think the solution to this problem is lowering the phase current limit to about 85 amps or lower. This will mean throttling will occur low enough below the hard limit that the Phaserunner will not get the instantaneous phase overcurrent fault by creating a buffer zone, right? So that's this, like, the arcane knowledge that I found in this post here is that, like, if you've tuned all of these things and, like, you can't get it to stop doing that instantaneous phase overcurrent thing when you're trying to accelerate from a stop, then you might have to lower your phase current. And it's just a function of, like, you're telling the motor controller that you want to do too much phase current, and just, like, combined with the BBSHD motor when you're really ripping, like, the phase current will peak above the limit that the Phaserunner allows, right? And it'll just do the fault and it'll cut out. And unless you lower the phase current, it might just keep happening, right? Based on what this guy said. So that's kind of the last thing that I would do. Like, after you really mess around, like, I've never increased the PLL bandwidth more than like 3,500. I've never increased the PLL damping. I think I've played with it up to like between 3 and 5, but it seemed like 3 or like usually
usually if your PLL bandwidth is like 3500, you'd probably want the PLL damping to be like 3 or something. It's kind of just like the bandwidth, but like with the decimal place over here, right? So I mean, I would, if I'm using 3500 on the bandwidth, like I would try like 3 on the damping, or like 3.5 on the damping. And I still don't have like a scientific way where you can find the perfect PLL damping and bandwidth. If anybody knows like more about this than I do, I'd be really interested to understand like how you can tune this exactly and find like the perfect values. But to me, it's just like I just trial and error, just kind of like change them, go right around, see what happens, change them, go right around, see what happens. It's kind of time consuming. But, and then so just some, like I don't usually change the vehicle parameters in the Phaserunner suite. Like if you're using a Phaserunner, you basically need to use the cycle analyst. It's the Phaserunner in headless mode sucks. Like it's just not very good. The throttle is really jerky, and like you need the cycle analyst to be able to control the power on a high voltage BBSHD. I don't usually change the wheel parameters at all in the Phaserunner suite, and in fact I think if you change the maximum speed, it can actually limit your maximum speed in some way. Like a while back I changed this maximum speed, and I think it'll let you change this value to like 256 or something, but I think it's actually like a 1-bit field or something, and like the, or whatever, and the maximum value that you can put into this speed is 128. And if you go above 128 right here in the maximum speed in the Phaserunner suite, like going from 128 to 129 kmh, that actually slows it down by 1 kmh, and it starts like rolling over. So don't just come in here to this maximum speed and try and like max it out. 128 is the max. I think it'll let you do 250, or no, it looks like they fixed it. They fixed the bug. That's incredible. They fixed the bug. I emailed them one time, and I was like, I was sitting there and I was trying to figure this out, and I was like, why, when I increase the speed limit, is it making me go slower? And it's like reducing the speed limit. And I used to be able to type 256 right here, but whenever I would go over 128, it would actually start slowing me down. So it seems like they've actually fixed the Phaserunner suite. They fixed the bug in it. That's incredible. Thank you, Justin. Finally. Man, it's been like 5 years. Like, that's one of these things about the Phaserunner that I don't like, is like it just never gets software updates. It's I like things that get a lot of software updates and stuff, like Vesk. So yeah, I mean, if you're having any other problems with it, like I would come through this thread, like there's just like lots of gold nuggets of information in this thread. Like this Squid Dog guy, like he had a lot of good he's kind of sharing his experimentation here. I think that he found, like when he set the max battery current above 55 amps on 21S, he would get the overcurrent limit. So like you might have to limit your battery current, because the BBSHD, I think it can only handle like 55 amps or so. So like if you set your battery current too high, it seems like that could potentially trip the instantaneous overcurrent faults too. So there's a lot of information in this thread, but some of it's helpful, some of it's not. And there's some things in this thread where like people were like, hey, I found this solution to this problem and it like totally solved it for me, and then I go and try it and it just has no effect on mine. So like you might want to try some things from this thread and they might work for you, but there were a lot of things in this thread that I tried that didn't work for me. But there's a lot of people that they say like they had to lower the max power limit to a certain level, or else like if they tried to do any more than that, it would get a fault. There's a lot of things to try in this thread, right? It seems like some people swear by using Hall sensors only instead of Hall start and sensorless run. So I mean, I don't know. Like, that's something that I've gone back and forth with a lot. This video is getting too long, guys. Like, YouTube, they always penalize me when I make these long videos that are too long. So I think that's it. Like, I think I've shared most of my arcane knowledge with you. Like, it's all just this thread. Like, I need to, like, back this thread up somehow and, like, save this offline off the internet. Because if this thread ever disappeared from the internet, it would be bad. Like, there's a lot of information in here that's very essential. That helped me out a lot on this journey, getting the BBSHD working with the Phaserunner. But that's kind of it. And in my experience, like, it's this feedback bandwidth tuning, the KP1, KI10, that's some kind of a cheat code for the BBSHD, and then you gotta tune the PLL bandwidth and damping a lot. Just, if you're on high voltage, max out the field weakening. If you have brake, you want to turn on this virtual electronic freewheeling, so make sure that you get brake cutoffs and like a shift sensor cutoff or some way where you can cut power when you're shifting. You don't need to shift that much on high voltage, but it can still be useful to have a few gears. I think ideally on high voltage, like, if there's some kind of internally geared hub with like 3 gears in it, that would probably be the perfect for high voltage BBSHD. And I think you would still, like, you could use, you'd definitely want some kind of like a brake cutoff for that. I think Bafang is actually coming out with an internally geared hub that can handle 200 newton meters of torque. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, so that's all of my knowledge about setting up the BBSHD and the Phaserunner suite with the Cycle Analyst. It's not like my #1 pick anymore, just because the Phaserunner is so expensive. Like, it's just crazy how expensive that thing is now. And like, there's flip skis that you can buy for $100 that are better. I mean, I just got a flip ski 75-200 on sale for like $100, and it's like twice as powerful as a Phaserunner, right? So, but I would say that the advantages of the Phaserunner are that it's just kind of like plug and play. It's waterproof. You don't have to mess around with wiring it. Like, if you just want to spend a bunch of money and get a controller and just like plug it in and have it work, the Phaserunner and the Cycle Analyst can be good. There's also that other high voltage kit from the High Voltage guy, like the High Voltage Light Electric Vehicles channel, and what he's done, so that's an ASI controller, but it's not white labeled like the Grin Phaserunner. The High Voltage guy, he's a partner with ASI, so then he programs it specifically for the BBSHD, and he probably has a better BBSHD, like a better ASI programming with the BBSHD. Like, I'm sure there's probably somebody at ASI helped him figure out, you know, how to optimize the BBSHD with ASI controllers. And they've got like some custom firmware or something going on their ASI controller as part of the high voltage kit. But the thing about the high voltage kit is, like, one, it's so expensive. It's like, the ASI kits are expensive to begin with, but then when you buy the high voltage kit, it's like, I think it's like $700 or like $800 just for like the kit, like the controller and the harness and stuff. So I mean, like, if you think the Phaserunner is expensive, getting that high voltage kit is even more expensive. And then the problem with the high voltage kit is that you can't use a Cycle Analyst, and you have to use like that Egg Rider display. It's like piece of junk display. So like, that's why I don't like the high voltage kit, is it's just too expensive. It's just man in the middle, like he's just upcharging the ASI controllers. That's probably better, like, if you just want to spend a bunch of money and buy a controller for a BBSHD and plug it in and never have to program anything and just have it work. Money's no object. I would probably buy the high voltage kit just because you don't have to mess around with wiring or tuning the Phaserunner or anything. But the thing about the high voltage kit is that it's a very expensive controller
that is programmed specifically for the BBSHD motor by the high voltage guy. And then you, as the end user, you don't have any way where you can reprogram that controller. Like, he programs it for you, and then you just plug it in, and that's it. Like, you don't have any access to the ASI documentation or the ASI software or customizing that high voltage kit controller, right? And so that's the main reason why I've always bought these Phaserunners instead of buying the high voltage kit, is because I switch controllers around between bikes so much. Like, I can't spend $800 on one controller that only works with one specific motor. And that's why I personally am willing to buy the Phaserunner and then deal with tuning it and deal with messing around with it to get it to work, is just because it's cheaper than the high voltage kit, and you can always use that Phaserunner. It's just a general purpose controller, and you have the Phaserunner suite where you can reprogram the Phaserunner for any motor, right? So that's kind of like all of my knowledge on the BBSHD and getting it set up with the Grin Phaserunner and the Cycle Analyst display. There's that video from Grin that could be useful. I've got some videos like wiring the inside of the BBSHD up to like Flipski and Vest controllers and stuff that might be useful as well. I guess I didn't really talk about like the wiring of the BBSHD to a different controller and show that in this video, but I kind of show that in my other Flipski video that I mentioned before, right? Where I did the Flipski to the BBSHD, or no, it was the BBSHD L10 Phaserunner, this one. L10 connectors work, and I don't... Right, so if you want to learn about the internal wiring of the BBSHD, I talk about it a little bit in this video, and then I show how to wire it up with an L10 connector, which might not make sense anymore, right? But if you want to learn about the internal wiring of the BBSHD, you can go do it there. And again, like, I wouldn't, since Grin has come out with this MT controller, like, this is the one that you want now, just to be clear, right? Like, if you're getting a BBSHD, you want to buy this Phaserunner MT, because it's a little bit cumbersome. And like, you gotta do some wiring, and it's a little bit hacky to set up a BBSHD with this Phaserunner L10, right? But for like the last 5 years, like, you couldn't even buy this one, right? So that's everything I know. Thanks for watching. This video is getting way too long. Let me know in the comments if you have a BBSHD and you use it with a Phaserunner. What do you do? What do you use for like the current the feedback bandwidth tuning stuff, like the KP and the KI? PLL bandwidth, PLL damping, these feedback bandwidth tuning settings. Like, I want to know what everybody uses in their Phaserunner, and I want to know, do you use Hall sensors only, or do you use Hall sensor start and sensorless run? Have you messed around with that at all? What is your experience with that? And let me know, like, if you figure out how to get rid of the instantaneous phase overcurrent faults, or like if you do some tuning of your own and you think that you stumble upon some kind of noteworthy information about setting up BBSHD with the Phaserunner, make sure you leave it in the comments and potentially go over and share it in this thread and contribute back to the Endless Sphere e-bike community. Thanks Grin for everything. Thanks Aerial Pixels and a lot of people in this thread for all of the information that they've shared here. I mean, this is going back almost 10 years of people messing around with getting the BBSHD working and the Phaserunner with Cycle Analyst 3. So you might want to go share your findings in this thread as well, but make sure you share them in my comments also, because I'm very interested in this. I'll still mess around with it a little bit in the future, guys, but like the Grin stuff, like, I'm kind of moving on from it. I like Vesk more. It's just too expensive. Like, it's just not competitive anymore. So,
maybe in the future, if Grin comes out with a VESC controller or something, or if they figure out how to, make the price more competitive on the Phaserunners, I might come back to it. But for the most part, I'm kind of moving on until and they need Bluetooth. Grin you got to get Bluetooth on there. So like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. That's it. That's how to get your BBSHD working with the Phaserunner. That's everything I know. Let me know what you find out in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time, bubbies. Peace out. I'm going to read another email from Steve Cumming. See what he's up to. So, see you guys later. Peace out.